Namaskar, everybody, and welcome to Desi Talk. We have an awesome guest today as well. I'm hoping for Yashu to join. So today's topic will be another poet. Oh, hey, Yashu, that was flawless. That was actually flawless. How did that work so well?
Yes. Hi.
Hey, I'm so happy to see you. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. How are you?
Good, good. It's been nice and sunny out here, so I'm feeling good about it. How's it over there? Are you
Mm.
in DC?
No, I am here in Florida. Um, yeah, here in Florida. I canceled my trip to DC because COVID be off the chain here in Florida, and I just didn't want to put my parents at risk, so had to
Okay.
cancel the trip.
Yeah. Mo Ooh, that's our writer Mona Shah. She says we're awesome. Thank you, Mona. So one thing I wanted to say before we start is to vote in California's recall election. That's really important. It's going to be happening September 14th, and I want to make sure all our viewers that are in California vote. I'm not going to tell you how to vote, but basically, there are only two questions. The first question is, do you want to recall the governor? Yes or no? And the second one is asking you to write in a candidate. And you have to write in a candidate regardless of whether or not you vote yes or no. And that's because if in the case that the governor gets recalled, your vote for the person that you write in will actually count. So you'll have influence in whoever ends up becoming the governor in California. Yeah, ends up becoming the governor in the state of California. I just had like a brain freeze as I was talking. I'm so sorry. I don't know why that happened. But yes, vote on the for the recall. Whichever way you want to vote, you can vote, but it's on September 14th. I also want to note that the reason why it's important to vote is because if, for example, only three people voted, those three votes will count and the governor will be recalled or not recalled based off of those three votes. So if you want your voice to matter, this is the time. People are always saying, like I vote and no one cares and my voice doesn't make a difference, but actually will make a difference in this recall election. So please, please, please go and vote in the California gubernatorial recall election. So that's my little spiel. I just wanted to put that out there because I'm all about voting and for, civic engagement. Is there anything else? Have you heard about the recall election, Yeshu?
I have heard about it. I am not as knowledgeable when it comes to California
Of course, yeah.
situation right now, but I think that's why this is important because we want to make sure that we are understanding this from all sorts of states, right? Like understanding why we're doing this, understanding that recall elections are a real thing, and as Srishti was saying, that your vote does matter. So September 14th, I put it in the comments,
Thank
recall
you.
election, all right, state of California. So be sure to participate because this time, you're like, as
Yeah,
always, but especially this time, your vote does really matter. So
it really
definitely make
matters.
sure.
There's no like, oh, we have the electoral process and we have all this other shit. It's literally like your vote decides whether or not our governor gets recalled. So a lot of the candidates, you're going to have to do some research. A lot of them are Republican. Not that I'm stating one way or the other. You just need to like really do your research and make sure you even write in a good candidate and not put in, yourself or a random friend, because that will actually detract from who actually gets put in place. So like very important. And I don't know if you anyways, I can't put my bias on this, but just vote. And with that, I do want to talk about. So we're still doing our August month theme because we took a few weeks off, so we're continuing the cycle. Um, and the interviewee that we have today was the one that actually wasn't able to come on a previous one, so I'm really happy that we actually just scheduled him for this whole time for today. Um,
Facts.
on the research
Big
screen.
facts. Big facts right there. Now,
Hey,
before we get into this real quickly, my host up here, please go
oh,
ahead and introduce yourself for everyone.
So sorry. Yes, I am Srishti Prabha, the managing editor at India Currents, and my co-host is.
Yashu Rao, plus model and confidence coach, founder and CEO of Air Studios.
Woohoo!
And I forgot to say, Srishti forgot to say, she's the research queen. That's her new title. You got to be like managing editor and research queen. At
Well, here's
India
the
Currents.
thing. We're both research queens. You just got your PhD, and
I'm still
as
trying to get used to
a
the doctor part.
yeah, you're the doctor, and I feel like I didn't realize. So I've like done all these different jobs and kind of happened upon this one. But when it comes to research, I mean, we should all be doing research on average, but for journalism and media and like putting out information, it's always important to do your research because we're kind of the threshold for like misinformation, disinformation. But I also think like everyone can do that research. Like, especially with this recall election, I want to make sure that if you're voting for someone, you do your research on who that person is. A lot of them don't have a lot out there. So they might not be great candidates because if they didn't put out that energy to tell you why you should vote for them, then I don't think that they deserve your time. That's like my only spin on this entire recall election. Other than that, just vote. I feel like I have too many opinions and I have to really censor myself sometimes. But okay, cool. So we introduced ourselves. We're still doing the theme of South Asian lit and in South Asian history and amplifying voices within that. We've had some good people. Yashu, you want to talk a little bit about who they've been so far?
Oh my goodness. So we have done amazing, amazing episodes talking about Desi poetry and literature from amazing Desi artists, okay? Starting with Dr. Ravi Shankar, who did a fantastic job. His poetry collection, which I am so excited about, is going to include 22, I believe was the number, different poets, and they kind of collaborated for this poetry book, which is releasing. I'm so excited about it. And I love it because what they kind of did was he gave everyone like a starter line, and then the rest of the poets had to like feedback on it and build on it, and it was like a two-way kind of process. And I just think in itself that was so poetic, right?
Yes. I think it's already out actually. That's not I think it's already a book that is published and exists. So if you're interested for other people, you
Oh,
can definitely find it. Yeah. I think he's publishing a novel, like his first novel. That's going to be coming out soon. I think he said September, October. So in this
gotcha.
time frame. But yeah, it was crazy. Like, like if you gave me a sentence and you were like, write a poem based off of it, and then I'll write the next sentence, I'd be like, dude, I don't know. I don't know how this is gonna turn out. So,
Right. And then we had Farzana Doctor come in last week, which I'm sorry, like I'm still having active conversations about this. I literally after the episode was talking to my mom, and me and my mom had a really long conversation about this topic, and we were really talking about like things like when she was growing up, like she was telling me about in her neighborhood how they had a doctor who would perform, you know,
these
certain
surgeries,
things,
yeah.
right, for like for their cultural reasons and stuff. And she was talking as if it was like very normalized. She's like, yeah, they do it all the time. And I was like, mom, like that's so shocking. And she was like, yeah, well, this is how we grew up. Like we like in my neighborhood growing up in our little village, like we had a person who was designated to do that. And
Wasn't
so
it
for
also
me,
like hymen sealing? Like in a lot of South Asian cultures, and I know my mom has mentioned that like they'll like just because you're not supposed to have sex before marriage, they'll do like surgeries to seal your hymen in the case that you are riding a bicycle and it like even if you didn't do anything, just to ensure that that's like fully sealed up. And that's like a crazy surgery that people do that's like, or it's an antiquated practice, hopefully. I haven't done enough research to know if it still exists, but yeah, research. So yeah, so
that
then
conversation
that
was
was
just like,
crazy. Yeah.
it was crazy and it was so informative. And I just love the fact that Farzana also read, a piece from her book, and it was like it called reference to like the Mindy Project. It was like funny, comical, but we're still talking about something very serious. We're talking about like a daily conversation that could be happening with Desi women, talking about their husbands and sex and all of that, which is not very frequently talked about. So I loved our conversation with Farzana Doctor. Really, really was amazing. And today we have got an amazing, super talented, like when y'all hear the bio, y'all will know, but like we have an amazing guest coming on today. Do you want to introduce our guest?
Yes, let me introduce our guest for today. Indran Amirthanayagam, I might have added an N. Amirthanayagam writes poetry in English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole, which is in and of itself crazy that he's doing all these languages, right? This is like linguistically, like you're breaking all these barriers. So I hope he reads us something in a different language. He has published 20 books, including Blue Window, Dialogos Books 2021, The Migrant States, Sur l'île nostalgique, Lyrica a tiempo, Uncivil War, and more. He hosts the Poetry Channel and on YouTube and edits the Beltway Poetry Quarterly. He's also a 2021 Emergency winner and a fellow of the Foundation for the Contemporary Arts, the New York Foundation for the Arts, the U.S.-Mexico Fund for Culture, and the MacDowell Colony. His book, The Elephants of Reckoning, won the Patterson Poetry Prize. Now, I'm not sure if it's a book or a poem, but he wrote that's the name, so he can correct us. I'm going to add him right now.
I'm so excited. The languages part. It's the languages part for me, okay? Like, how amazing is that?
This is,
success,
I'm glad. Success. Last time, not success, but we tested it out this time, so we knew.
Okay.
Welcome. Thank you so much, Indran, for being here today. Such an honor to be with you today to talk about your amazing work.
Thank you.
In how many languages was that? Like, oh my goodness.
The funny thing is, I don't use my other native language, which is Tamil, and then I used to speak Sinhalese as a child as well, but I don't speak those languages anymore. But I speak all these other languages: French and Spanish, Portuguese and Haitian Creole, and I write in them, which is the odd thing. I've crossed that border, you know, the water. I've gone into the other side, and I'm in territory. So I don't believe in borders. You know, I like crossing borders, as we all do, migrants that we are. But
so why don't you tell us how you came? You know, how you like had these other languages that you lost, and how you've come to find these new languages. I think that would be interesting to know.
Yeah, well, you know, I was 8 years old when I left the island, the original island of Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. And I landed in another island, I guess, England. I landed in London. And I think I went to school. I think it was a traumatic experience, you know, that move. And then it was another trauma took place when I had some abuse hurled at me by an old woman in a black cape and a black hat on a bicycle, and she just screamed all this racist language at me as an 8-year-old. I was quite impressionable, and I was quite shocked by this reaction, you know, of hate and bile. And anyway, I went, but you know, I love many things in England, and I have many friends from England. But there's that dark underbelly, you know, to the culture, which comes from, which is also you find in the United States. I mean,
you have colonial,
and just racism. We find it everywhere in the world. But I experienced it a little bit in London at that time, and I think losing the language has something to do with it. I blocked it out. I said to myself, I'm not going to speak Tamil anymore because I want to be part of the society. I want to assimilate, and I'll shock myself into assimilating, you know. And then I had an inadequacy about languages. I thought there was something wrong with me, that I'd forgotten this language, you know, and I grew up feeling insecure about languages. And when I started writing poetry, I got to the United States, to Hawaii, another island, Oahu. I was 14 years old, and I wrote my first poem. And you know, I copied a poem of my dad's, actually. I just changed the title and added my own lines, but you know, writing poetry, I realized, and it helped strengthen me, you know, intellectually. I began to feel that I had something to say. I was on earth for a reason. I had a purpose, you know, and that purpose was to write poems, to share them. For me, a poem written is only just part of the process. I mean, it has to be shared somehow, whether it's printed, whether it's sent by email, whether it's read to someone, and then it's completed. And I started writing those poems, and I studied French in school in England. I studied French in school in American high school, but in Punaho. But I always had a bit of an inadequacy about languages, and then I went abroad. I mean, then I came to Washington. After being in New York for 10 years, I was a poet in New York. It was a wonderful experience. But I took the Foreign Service exam. I became an American diplomat. I came to Washington. I had to learn languages. I felt I wasn't going to represent this country abroad without knowing the language, inside out. And
so you were an American diplomat for the US?
Yeah.
Where were you going?
I was going to Argentina initially. Then I went to Brussels, to Belgium. Then I went to Abidjan, to Cote d'Ivoire. And then I went to Mexico City. And then I just kept going, traveling.
So you were learning these languages as you were going.
Yeah. And then I was in Abidjan in West Africa, on the Ivory Coast, and I started a reading series with an Ivorian friend called Lecture Tournant du Dimanche, like revolving readings on Sundays, but we used to meet on Saturday evenings, but that's another matter. And so the language that unified that country, I mean, there were 60-odd languages spoken there, is French. I mean, the colonial language, but it's the language everyone speaks. And so I also speaking French, and I started writing in French to share my poems with this group. And that's where it began, the idea of writing outside of English. English is also my mother tongue. And, I've been writing speaking English, from the first words I spoke. And, it took me a while to speak. I was about 3, I think, when I said my first word. So my parents were quite worried, but I think I was storing up a lot of words inside.
And now you don't stop.
Now I don't stop, no. Except Instagram sometimes stops me because I can't get off.
Technology.
But this time, yeah. Anyway.
So you, as a diplomat, what was your work there? Like, what were you doing in all these places?
Well, I had different jobs. I was a political officer. I was following political developments. I was an environmental officer, environment, science, technology. But principally, I've been a public affairs officer, which means press, cultural programs, education, public, civil society, engaging with the public, walking the policy to the public and explaining what we're about in the United States to the host country, which means you're not just a representative of a government, you're also a representative of a people, all its variety, all its diversity. And
I was going to say that it's interesting that you are representing the U.S. considering, you had lived so much of your life in other places also.
Right.
It sounds like
it's a wonderful thing about the United States is that it gives a first-generation immigrant the chance to represent it abroad. Most countries don't do that. You have to be born in the country to become its representative. But the United States is an exception in that sense. I mean, I like to think about the positive things about the United States too. I mean, it's a great country. It has many, many strengths. You can remake yourself in this country in a way that you can't in many places in the world, and that's the dream. And that's what I think of as the American dream, that idea of remaking yourself. But at the same time, there are challenges and difficulties, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We just came through 4 years of the most disastrous presidency in the history of the nation. And you say not to talk about politics, my dear, regarding the
no. I can't insert my personal ideas on the recall, but I can tell you to be politically engaged.
All right. Well, I will say quite openly that Gavin Newsom needs to be re-elected. So vote for him because he is an environmentally conscious humanist, running the state of California. But that's just my view. All right, I'm not. But voting is the key.
I will say, as a non-India Currents
Right. Right.
representative, Srishti myself, I will definitely be voting no on the recall. But as an India Currents rep, I have no
You
opinion.
very good. I understand that completely as a diplomat, because as a diplomat, you represent the government in power, whether it's Democrat or Republican, and you represent the American people, which is Democrat, Republican, you know, communist, I mean, or
Yeah, you have to be on.
denominational,
Yeah, you have to understand all perspectives, which is,
That's right.
I think, in this space, and I'm sure through poetry and for Yashu, like through these conversations, I think one of the big things that we are trying to do is get all the perspectives.
Right.
And I would never be one to shut down someone's voice because it doesn't align with my views. I definitely am open to hearing it, and I'm sure as a diplomat and as a poet, you probably had to do that quite a bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm speaking here as a private citizen, just my views, right? But of course, I'm very proud of this country and what its possibilities are, and that's what I like to celebrate when I go abroad, when I work as a diplomat, or when I work in this country. I mean, when I edit the Beltway Poetry Quarterly, which is a poetry journal, but what I've done with it, with working with my co-editor, my associate editor Sarah Cahill Marin, is invite poets from all over the world to contribute, and focus on translations, and focus on reviews and commentary. So the magazine becomes not just a publishing of poems, but also the publishing of sort of ideas about the art and assessments of the art and translations, because I really think translation is key to making peace in the world, and so we need to translate each other, whatever languages we speak or inherit, bring them, let there be commerce between us, yeah.
Right.
So I want to kind of talk a little bit more about your poetry.
Sure.
What are some of the themes that you talk about? We've kind of addressed languages, but I kind of want to know, what are the topics, what are the themes that you often talk about in your poetry?
Well, I mean, migration, I was very lucky early in my career. My first book, The Elephants of Reckoning, there was a comment written about it by A.K. Ramanujan, who was a great poet and a translator. And Ramanujan said, a welcome addition to the poetry of migration. And that phrase has stuck with me, the poetry of migration. I think, and then more recently, I wrote a book called The Migrant States, which is both the states of migrants and the migrant stating or speaking, So the poetry of migration is key theme in my poetry. The poetry of exile, the poetry of a loss of a paradise, because in a way, Ceylon, which no longer exists, they call Sri Lankan now, was a kind of paradise at one time where different groups lived together in relative harmony, though it might have been my idealizing it, but, so how do you recover that kind of peace and make peace between different communities is a challenge both politically and poetically for me, and my approach has been just to celebrate diversity and communion, bridge building. Marriage of continents was a theme of my dad's, and I like to celebrate that idea, the marriage of continents, bringing people together from different languages, different ethnic groups, and just saying, we're all in this together before the sun, before the rain, before the hurricane, whatever, we have to work together. And,
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think I was lucky to get to hear some of your poetry from Uncivil War when we did our poetry readings earlier with India Currents. And that was actually kind of, I know a little bit about the Sri Lankan wars and what happened, but I think that's like the first time I've had someone relay their personal experiences to me. And so I was wondering if you'd want to read something from that, because we're on the topic. It'd be nice to hear and contextualize what you're talking about. Yeah.
Here's the book. It's called Uncivil War. It's available. It's a lot of poetry. It's about 200 odd pages, 200 pages almost of poetry. But it's not all about the war in a sense. It's a sort of a history of what happened leading up to the war, what happened during the war, and how the war ended. In a way, it ended. I mean, there was a time in 2009 when it ended after about 25 years of fighting off and on, you know. But
Hmm.
but the war, does it really ever end? Or is the peace a kind of cold peace, you know? I mean, the challenges of healing still need to be addressed, you know.
Yeah, the
I mean,
aftermath of a war is much worse than even sometimes the time period of the war. So,
one thing I would say, I did get a chance to read from this book in Jaffna in the north, at the University of Jaffna.
oh wow.
Last
Hmm.
time I traveled to the island, which is before the pandemic, you know, sort of December 2018, January 2019. And it was a cathartic experience. I mean, I read these
Hmm.
poems and people were crying, I was crying, and it was a full house of people who had
Yeah.
lived through the war, who had lived
Through
through the
lived, yeah,
bombing,
lived there.
who had
Hmm.
seen, you know, their relatives killed, so it was a
For our
I
tragic,
mean,
viewers,
and the poems can help, you know, they can help at least in a kind of catharsis, healing.
definitely.
for our
So here's
viewers who
one,
may
if
not
you'd
be
like.
aware of
Sorry.
what for our viewers who may not be aware of, what war this is, what happened, can you give us kind of just like a brief, this is,
Sure.
what happened, or like the storyline, just so that people who may not be aware of, the context would have it?
I would call it the Sri Lankan Civil War, and it began, I would say, in 1958, before I was born, when what was called the Ceylon riot, the riots took place, which is basically attacks on the Tamil minority by gangs organized by the Sinhalese or elements in the Sinhalese majority. Okay, and then that was in 1958. Then in 1983, there was something called Black July, which was this terrible week of burning of homes, of people, of killing, again directed towards against the minority Tamils, and some politicians were involved in that uh, killing, and that led to the civil war. I mean, the Tamil Tigers and other guerrilla groups were formed as a result of that situation, and there were about 5 or 6 groups all fighting for an independent state. Then what happened was they fought each other, which doesn't seem to make much sense. You know, united we stand, divided we fall. So there were all these groups among the Tamils fighting each other, killing each other off. And then the Tigers remained as the most powerful. And they took over the charge of fighting the Sri Lankan state, basically, initially with help from India in the early days under Indira Gandhi, and then on their own. And they made mistakes, the government made mistakes, but eventually it just ended up being 100,000 civilians, with the remaining Tigers moving from campsite to campsite while they were being aerial bombed and strafed, and they were being attacked by sea. It was a horrible, horrible end to this war. Many, many people died. Maybe 70,000 people died, civilians I'm talking about, not the
Hmm.
Tigers. Died in that last year of the last years of the war. So it was a tragic end, and that's why memorializing is important. That's
Hmm.
why any attempts to wipe away the chances for
Yes.
people to mourn need to be called out. And anyway, so that's a little bit about the war. I would
Thank you.
recommend, there's so many things to read and movies to see and so on, to find out more, and poetry to read. This book is a history, attempts to be a history of that war. Obviously, I'm a Tamil. I mean, my friend Sanjana, who writes the introduction, is a Sinhalese writing, and he says I'm writing from a partial view, a point of view, which is inevitable. I mean, I'm born into a clan, a culture, a way of looking. But my goal is that to tell the history, to tell the story. And in one of the poems of the book, it's called Fire Department. It goes like this: Where is your village burning? Where is your village mined fields? Where is your village blasted in crossfire, wounded under jungle trees? Where is your village running across marshes, shot in the back Where is your village? Waving white flags, frisked, registered, supervised in a camp. Where is your village? Blowing up army friskers. Other villages, where is your village? Toronto, Berlin, Tamil Nadu, where is your village? Madagascar as option has not been discussed. Where is your village? Hasta la vista, special envoy. Where is your village? Burning. So in a sense, the village is burning, but the planet is burning, you can say. I mean, there's a kind of ecological war going on right now, and we need to unite to fight it. And so this book is about a political war, but there is something else going on now. And that's where you asked about themes. And so for me, the loss of home, the poetry of migration, yes, but also the poetry of the environment, in a sense. I mean, where are we living? What are we doing to ourselves? That's another big theme.
Well, I think the question of like, where is your village is it I think it evokes a response of like of identity, right? Where you live and where your home is a lot of times who you are. And when someone's continuously asking you that question and you don't know, or you're constantly moving and you're a migrant, like you don't have an answer to that question. So then you lose almost like a sense of identity because you don't have a response. And I think that poem really, hits home with that. No pun intended.
Right. And curiously, the fact that I've written it in English for some people would be problematic also, because they associate language with identity, and so the Tamil language. I mean, the question is, should I have written that poem or my books in Tamil? My answer to that is English is also a language of the Tamils, just as is it a language of the Sinhalese in Sri Lanka. It's a universal language. All languages, I would say, are universal.
But it's also your language, right? That's the language you knew. And I feel like that's true to your experience of someone having almost had to like that. You're answering the question of like, where is your village? And you're like moving and changing, and you no longer have your language anymore. And partially because of probably traumatic experiences of how people viewed you. And now, like, this is the language in which you can best express yourself. So who's going to question that? Like,
right.
I feel like that's
no problem. I mean, I'm confident in my language now, but there was a time like every human being, you doubt sometimes, and then the doubting helps strengthen your thinking and your argument, your making of arguments, and we're talking with a PhD and all this here, so I'm sure you can tell me about arguments and how to make them well and persuasively, because you're all scholars. We're all scholars, actually, in a way. But the term scholar, we're scholars of human experience. That's what poets are, actually. And they're sort of and scholars of history, in a sense. That's what I'm doing in this book. And also in the other books, like this one, The Migrant States, which is the book that came out last year. And then in this one, Blue Window, I'm a scholar of love and all that happens in love, because it's a book I wrote in Spanish, Ventana Azul, translated by Jennifer Rathburn into English. Anyway, so, poets are, this is how I live. This is my passion. And I'd love to share it with you. And thank you for this.
I'd love to hear another poem, if possible, maybe in another language, even just to give our viewers a little taste of, the diversity of your work.
Sure. I could read from Blue Window. It just came out, and it's hot off the press, and you can find it in any bookstore. I mean, you have to ask for it. You have to ask them to order it, but it's out. It's available. I could read a small poem from it in the original Spanish and then in the English translation. As I mentioned, it was translated by Jennifer Rathburn, who I worked with reviewing the translations. It's a wonderful experience of seeing your own words sort of move into the other language through the mind of another person. Fuera del oasis. No tengo fuerzas por las mañanas, escuchando al canto de los pájaros en sus danzas amorosas. No las tengo cada día de esta soledad, interrumpida en la tierra por los oasis que aparecen y se quedan en sus huecos, mientras el peregrino sigue su camino. Que estés bien, te digo, que te cuides y encuentres la alegría, y sí, que poco a poco empieces a olvidar al compañero que te llevó a aquella laguna en medio de las dunas. Out of the oasis. I don't have strength in the mornings, listening to the birds' songs and their love dances. I don't have it every day in this solitude, interrupted on earth by the oases which appear and remain in its gaps, while the pilgrim follows his road. I wish you well, I say. Take care, and may you find happiness, and yes, little by little, begin to forget the companion who took you to that lagoon in the middle of the dunes. You know, it's about love and about the end of love too. It's about love and the goodbye. It's about love and in successions. And the book is a complete book. You know, Uncivil War is a book about war. This is a similarly thick book about love. And you know, love is an eternal emotion. It's what gives us life, right? Without love, we wouldn't be here. So we are grateful.
Why did you choose to write your love book in Spanish?
What I was living at the time in Spanish. You know, I mean, I was living in a Spanish-speaking country in Peru. I'd lived earlier in Mexico and in Argentina. So it was in the air. It was in the bird song. It was around me.
Well, were you falling in and out of love in these countries? Is that why?
Well, I must admit, I've had my moments of falling in and out of love. Yes, throughout my life in different places. So I've been a wanderer. I say in the word pilgrim, peregrino in Spanish, pilgrim of love, I guess, I must admit. And here I am. I've survived. I've got 20 books of poetry published, but love is always there. You know, it's everywhere. It's in a, you know, I have 2 children. The love of family. There's the love of God. There's the love of a partner, of a companion. So you have many kinds of love, as we all know. Mm-hmm. And what I try to do in this book is look outside. I mean, my son did this cover, Blue Window. You know, I look out the window and I see that. You know, and I see that sky, and I imagine, and I think we are living in this world of windows right now, right? Since the pandemic, I mean, we're looking at each other through our windows, and I'm trying to say, you know, our imagination is limitless, and we can travel to the moon and beyond, right? Much beyond. If we and we can and love replenishes, even if it seems in the most desperate, melancholic moment. And I've had those moments. I wake up the next morning. I somehow do, and the light is bathing on me, you know, and getting me up. So I guess I'm ultimately an optimist, despite the pessimism, you know, that sometimes falls on me.
So does your family and your kids, do you read your poetry to them? Are they involved in the making of your poetry, or are they kind of...
It's a very receptive question. Yes, they are in a way. I mean, I do read the poems to them, or I share them. I send them by email now, and sometimes and when I get a chance, or if I can corner them, I'll read them. But one of them is away. She's in Argentina with her mother, so it's a long distance. You know, we depend on WhatsApp and so on. And my son is closer by. So yeah, they inspired the poems. They're in the poems. You know, if you go through my books, you'll find them in different places.
I don't know if we would know we're finding them. I think only you know where they're hidden, right? So that's why I asked. You're the only one that can tell us where they are in your poetry.
Well, I'd be happy to go through a book and show you. Oh, this slide is about. Yeah.
Well, I don't think we have that much time today, but I think, Yashu, any last questions,
I
comments,
just have to
things to
say,
say?
I just love the way Indran speaks in general. It's just so poetic. I love your word choice. I love the way you deliver your message. Like, I'm just here just listening to you,
Thank you so much.
truly admiring even the way you're speaking to us. Is just so poetic. But with that being said, I thought there was a magic in having your, and I'm a person who really appreciates language, and the authenticity of any type of poetry, even songs, right? Like, for example, I know like a lot of like Indian music is then dubbed into another language, and I always listen to the authentic, like original language,
Right.
because I feel like that in itself is just, there's a beauty to that word selection and diction. So for me, just hearing you recite it in Spanish and all the at the end, the isses at the end, there's a magic to that. There's a beauty in that, and I really, appreciated it. I would love to. Are your books available as audiobooks, or are they available? Is your poetry available in an audio format anywhere, or have you done any readings before that people can maybe see or visit or anything like that?
Oh, sure. There's an album that people can download on Spotify, etc., called, it's in Creole, but it's beautiful music and words. It's Rankont Dut, Rankont, and the second word Dout. It means meeting in August or meeting with doubt. It's a play on words. But if you look up Indran and Rankont Dut, I think you'll find it on any of the music stores. Another thing to do, there's the poetry channel that I do on YouTube, where I post videos of poets reciting their work in different languages. There's a lot of my own work there. There's a lot of work by poets from India, from England, from the United States, all over the world, really. So it's an interesting site. I'd recommend people to look for it. If they just Google Indran, Indran, and YouTube, you'll find it, and then you can subscribe. I always like new subscribers, so please subscribe, even if you're not going to listen. Um,
Just for the likes.
just for the like.
Um,
No, but that's where you can hear some record. I
yes.
haven't done a formal studio album of me reading just my poems, but I did that album with the musicians, and maybe I'll
Yeah.
do some more in the future. Yeah.
I love that Yashu brought up the idea of an audiobook because accessibility is big, and I know we're starting to kind of see it in the sphere of things. Maybe we can make these videos accessible at some point, but it's important to acknowledge that not everyone has the ability to read or
Right.
can. So, yeah, these things are available in other forms. That's amazing. So we can find Indran on YouTube. You can find Indran and Run Kundut.
Rankont Dut, right.
Ron Conduit. If you Google it, hopefully you'll find that on Spotify. I think so. Yeshu's put it all in the chat. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us or Indran. Indran, do you have any, you have a new book coming out people should look out for? What's going on in your life?
Yeah. Well, I mean, do look out for Blue Window. I think it's a great book about of love poems, and hopefully it'll be much read. That's easily available on Amazon you can ask for it at your local bookstore, Blue Window. I've got some books coming out. There's a new book coming out early next year called 10,000 Steps Against the Tyrant, which is a book of political poems, and coming out from Broadstone Books. And I have a book of my Creole poems, Haitian Creole, translated into English that I translated. It's called Poet at the Port, Poet Nanpola, and that's in Creole, Poet at the Port, and that will come out next year. So the easiest things to find right now are Blue Window and Uncivil War, and then this book, The Migrant
The
States.
Migrant States.
I
Man,
would,
I really want to read all of these. I haven't gotten access to them yet, but
okay. I hope you,
but
I hope you will get a chance to. The Migrant States is an interesting book also because I engage in a dialogue with Walt Whitman in the book, who, on his 200th birthday. And so there are these poems written to and from Whitman. And, Whitman is a fundamental poet in American literature and history. And so it's interesting to, as a migrant now, looking back at Whitman and seeing what he says to us today, 200 years after he walked on the planet in the country. Yeah.
definitely.
Thank you so much, and such an honor to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you.
forward to seeing more of your works. I am definitely about to find this Creole poem musical, almost,
Yeah,
I guess you said, on Spotify.
you
I'm
can
so
you can
excited
find
about
it on anything, Apple Music. I think it's pretty much everywhere. It just
absolutely.
yeah.
Thank you so much for being
Thank
here
you.
today. We appreciate you for sharing your history with us, sharing your work with us, your art. And Srishti, go ahead and close us out.
Yes, thank you, Indran, so much for
Thank you.
coming. We've
Thank
learned
you.
about the Sri Lankan Civil War. We've learned about themes in your work. We've learned so much about history and literature and language. So this could not have gone any better. Thank you so much. And like Yashu said, you do have a way with words, very professorial almost. I feel like I had a poetry lecture, and I feel like I've learned. So thank you, thank you, thank you. If you want to find Indran, you can find him through us or through just Googling his name and looking up his work. So with that, thank you. Come back next week. We have an interview with actually pretty famous Alka Joshi, who just wrote 2 books. So if you know her name, definitely join. If you don't, then you'll find out. So that'll be great. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.